You are welcome to this lesson. As usual, my name is John Kokasobodin, and we are going to be looking at some of the content, some piece of work that we have in primary 7. We are going to be on page 21. In the previous discussion that we had, we looked at the economic organization of the people in Africa, whereby we looked at the people of Africa carrying out a number of activities, that is, before the coming of the foreigners. People in Africa were doing a number of activities, and we talked of activities like trade, and it's from that trade that we are picking today our item of discussion, that is about the Trans-Saharan trade, as we have it here on our board. We have Trans-Saharan trade. We can write this trade in short as TST, Trans-Saharan trade. Now, before we continue, we need to understand that Trans-Saharan, trans means across. Trans means across. Then we have Saharan. Of course, now that is, we have the Sahara Desert in Africa. When we look at the map of Africa, you will find that we shall be having what we call the Sahara Desert here. This is the Sahara Desert, which means when we come to talk about the Trans-Saharan trade, remember, trade simply means the buying and selling of goods. And we say that during those days, people were exchanging goods for goods. And that is what brought what we call barter trade. Therefore, we are going to look at the trade which was carried out between the people who lived in West Africa and those who lived in North Africa across this Sahara Desert. That's why we call it Trans-Saharan Desert. Trans-Saharan trade. The trade, we have the definition saying this was the trade carried out between the people of West Africa. We have the people of West Africa and North Africa across the Sahara Desert. Exactly what we have here. That is why we call it Trans-Saharan trade. It was conducted across the Sahara Desert. So if a question asks you, why was it called Trans-Saharan trade? We call it, it was called Trans-Saharan trade because it was carried out across the Sahara Desert. Now, we need also to note that we have got tribes that were participating. We had the tribes in West Africa exchanging goods with those people who had settled in the northern part of Africa, as we have said, across the Sahara Desert. Now, we have tribes in West Africa that participated in the TST. When I put here TST, I mean Trans-Saharan trade, the one we are looking at. Which tribes participated in this Trans-Saharan trade? One, we have the Soninke, we have the Mandingo, we have the Tuaregs, the Asante, and we have the Hausa. These are the tribes that participated in the in the Trans-Saharan trade in West Africa. And then we also have those that had settled in North Africa. Of course, this one shall be looking at the people the foreigners who had lived there. We have the Arabs, we have the Jews, the Romans, and then we have the Greeks. Therefore, like I said, these people could exchange goods for goods. And I said, without involving money. Now, we are going to look at the trade items that they were exchanging. Meaning that there were those trade items which were needed from West Africa. And then there were those items that were needed from, which were also got from these foreigners who had lived in North Africa. Now, we begin from those in West Africa. We had items like gold, items like slaves. We have got ivory that we get from the elephants. And last time we said that due to this trade activities, it led to the increased killing of elephants for ivory. Then we have hides and skins, back cloth, and salt. Salt. We have underlined the salt. We shall be coming to look at why have we underlined the salt. Let's first continue. We have the trade items from North Africa, from these people now. We have the beads, glasses, mirrors, guns, clothes, camels, copperware, we have shoes, and many others. So these items here were the ones that were from North Africa to be sent or to be exchanged with those in West Africa. Now, these traders faced some problems as they were carrying out that trade across the Sahara Desert. And that is what we have here. Problems faced by traders during the trans-Saharan trade. Whether those in West Africa or those in North Africa, we are putting all these problems together. The first problem say that they were affected or they faced a problem of harsh desert conditions. Remember we said this trade was carried out across the Sahara Desert, implying that when they come across a desert condition, you will find that, of course, a desert is always very hot, like during daytime. We say that deserts are too hot because there is no, or they have clear skies. There are no clouds to regulate the heat, and that was a problem. And then also, these desert areas also tend to be too cold at night, still due to the absence of heat to regulate the temperatures in the atmosphere. So we have the place very hot during daytime, very cold during night hours due to the absence of clouds in the sky. Another problem they faced was shortage of water and food, that is as they were carrying out that activity. And then we have loss of directions. You find that when we look at a desert, you will find there is no clear road. There are no clear routes that people were to pass. You find that as you pass somewhere, the wind blows and it can cover those footsteps. And you will find that you may not even be able to tell where you have come from and where you are going. So you could find that these people could end up getting lost in the desert, in the middle of the desert. You are trying to cross the other side and you end up making a U-turn, or maybe you end up from where you started your journey. And that is what brought a problem we call loss of directions. And then the other one is that some of these people got even buried by this sand in the desert. Some of them were buried by the sand dunes. In the desert, we have the heaps of sand that we call sandy dunes. Sandy dunes. We define sand dunes as heaps of sand in a desert. So you find that as the winds blow, these winds tend to carry soil, they tend to carry the sand, and they can end up piling the sand in an area, forming that heap that we call sand dune, or sand dunes if there are many. So some of these people got buried by this sand in the desert, which became a problem to them. And then they were also attacked by some dangerous animals and some dangerous communities. Those are the tribes where they passed, or tribes where they could pass through as they were carrying out their trade. Now we continue with our lesson. We have the reasons as to why the trans-Saharan traders, get it well, reasons as to why the trans-Saharan traders built tents near the oasis. Now, the oasis, that is in the plural form. If it was one, we would call it an oasis with I. This is a place in a desert where water can be got from. or a place in a desert which has water. So you could find that these traders could camp near those oases. They could build tents near them and they could gather there. For what reasons? Number one, we are saying they could camp near these oases to access water, such that they could get water from those water places or water points. And then also they could gather there to discuss the trade opportunities, to discuss which items were selling much in the market, which items were seriously needed. That is what we call discussing trade businesses, trade chances or trade opportunities. So these are the reasons as to why they could build, these traders could build around near the oasis. Then we have a note which is going to explain why we underline the salt. On our note, we are saying during the trans-Saharan trade, salt was on a high demand. It was one of those precious items of trade, one of those items that people wanted so much. And for that, we shall be able to give the reason why was salt on a high demand during the trans-Saharan trade. The reasons are: one, salt was needed to preserve. The word is preserve, to preserve meat. Then two, salt was also needed to preserve the hides and skins from the animals. Remember, when we talk about food preservation, we have salting as one of the local ways or methods of preserving fish. Food in general. I'm sorry I mentioned the fish because it's one of those things that we can preserve. But also other foodstuffs can be preserved, like meat, as we have said. So salt was on a high demand because it was used to preserve meat, and also it was used to preserve the hides and skins so that they don't go bad. Instead, they can be preserved and processed into other products. So those are the reasons as to why the salt was on a serious demand. We are still continuing with our lesson, and now we are going to look at another item which was also seriously needed in that trans-Saharan trade, and that is about the camels. Now, when we looked at the items that were brought or that were exchanged, that were brought from the people in North Africa, we shall be looking at the items like we looked at the guns, the clothes, and camels, among others. Now, we shall be able to tell that camels are those animals that are reared for transport, and for them, they are reared in desert areas. We need to understand these different animals and the different places where they can be reared in Africa. We have camels, we have donkeys, we have horses. So we need to understand, by the end of this lesson, we should be having all that in our minds. Now, we have camels kept in deserts, in desert places, for transport. We have got donkeys. You can add this to your book. Donkeys are kept in mountainous areas. Mountainous. Or we can also say hilly areas, still for transport. And then we have the horses. The horses are the ones that are kept in flat areas, or we shall say on plains. They are kept in plain areas for transport. So we need to understand the different animals kept for transport and the different areas where they can be kept. Now, let's come back to camels because it is what we are having. So we shall be able to say that camels are those animals that are that can manage living in that desert condition. And we are going to look at reasons that make a camel to be able to live in that harsh desert condition, or in those harsh desert conditions. We can call them the adaptations of a camel to survive in desert conditions. Now, the first one is, you will find that camels have got the large humps, and those humps have got the fats that can be broken into energy. You find when this camel moves for a long distance without drinking water, without eating anything, you find the fats that are stored in those humps can be broken into energy that this animal will keep on using to move. Second adaptation is, these camels have got hard eyelids. They have hard eyelids. Camels have hard eyelids. Of course, these hard eyelids are hard so that they cannot be spoiled by the wind. And to add on that, you will find that these camels have got long eyelashes. Camels have long eyelashes. You will find that when you look at a camel, you find this hair here on its eye. Those eyelashes are too long. How and why? These ones are long to help it trap, or to help it in blinking, such that it can trap the dust, or to prevent the soil from entering its eye. So that is another adaptation of these camels to live or to survive in such harsh desert conditions. And then lastly, we shall also be able to say that these camels have got padded hooves. They have padded hooves that can manage to walk on that sand without it sinking. Remember, if it had sharp or maybe pointed hooves, you would find as it steps on that sand, maybe the leg would maybe sink. But you will find that the hooves are padded. The feet have that pad such that it is able to walk easily on the sand. That is what we call having padded hooves to help it walk easily on that sand in the desert. So those are the adaptations of these camels to survive or to live well in that desert condition. Next, we are going to look at what happened due to the Trans-Saharan trade. What happened due to the Trans-Saharan trade? And we shall be calling those the effects. I told you one time, these effects, we can also call them results. We can also call them outcomes. Here we are going to be looking at this in two. Like I have always said, there are those that were good, positive ones. So we can simply call these positive effects. And then when we reach somewhere, we shall also be having the negative effects. Now, since they are in our books, I may not be able again to rewrite them on the board. Instead, we shall be discussing them as we shall be understanding them well, where you are not understanding. The first effect, which was positive, says that this trade made West Africa and North Africa to be exposed. What I mean is, it made those places to be known to the rest of the world. Remember when we were looking at the long distance trade in East Africa, when we were in primary 6, we say that the long distance trade opened the interior of East Africa to the rest of the outside world. Or it made East Africa known to the rest of the world. So also here, North Africa and West Africa got known to the rest of the world. And then too, of course, we looked at the Arabs from the north. We shall say that due to the movement of the Arabs from one place to another like that, carrying out trade, you will find that in areas they could pass, they could spread Islam, that is their religion. So as a result, Islam got spread. We can simply write it as widespread of Islam. It led to widespread of Islam. So you'll find that the Arabs could now spread Islam in areas where they could reach or they could pass. And then it led to the growth of ancient kingdoms, those kingdoms that were at first, we are having them growing and expanding. And then also, of course, you know, just like we learned about in primary 6, the presence of the Arabs, we said they led to the establishment of coastal towns, whereby we looked at coastal towns like Pemba, Mogadishu, Zanzibar, Malindi, Kilwa, Sofala. I remember and I know you learned about those coastal towns. They developed due to the trade that was taking place between the Arabs and those coastal people. So also here we shall be saying that many towns developed, more so those that were situated or that were located on those paths where these traders could pass. Very many towns grew up and developed from that trade. And then it made people wealthy. Of course, those who could exchange things with the Arabs, with the Greeks, with the Jews, with the Romans, they could become rich because they were able to afford or to get wealth from them. And we are having new items of trade were introduced into Africa. For example, we talked of the guns. They were now brought from other foreign countries and they were exchanged and Africans got them. And also, we shall be able to say that the kings or the chiefs, those are the ones we call the African traditional leaders, grew rich. Most of them became rich because they were now benefiting from this. Remember, we are having a slave trade there. We said one of the things they wanted from West Africa were the slaves. So when it comes to the slaves, of course, we go back to our downer concept that we know about slave trade. We say that the African leaders could participate. They could now like sell people to the slave traders. As a result, they could get money. And that was the reason as to why we say that they did not want slave trade to be abolished. They didn't want slave trade to end. Reason, they were benefiting from it. They could now sell these slaves to the other foreigners and they get gifts, they get materials, property, that thereby becoming wealthy. We go to, of course, it was a positive effect to them. Those traditional leaders became wealthy. Now, when we got the negative effects, of course, we have talked of slave trade. Slaves were wanted from West Africa, which means that this trade resulted into slave trade. People were now sold by the local leaders, and this brought misery in some families. It brought death of such people. It brought separation of families. For example, when they come to our home and you find they take maybe daddy, you will find that that would be the end of you seeing the dad. And it will be the end of daddy also seeing his family members. They are going to take dad for a long journey, carrying goods, and you'll find that when they travel for a long distance, if the person becomes sick and can no longer move, they will now leave the person there, and the person could just die on the way. That is the negative effect number one. We are saying slave trade caused misery to Africans. Then secondly, it led to intertribal wars. There were now wars. That is, we looked at the problems that those people faced. We just rubbed them here. We say that they also faced a problem of dangerous tribes attacking them. So you could find that there were some tribes which could not allow them to pass via their area. When they do, or if they did such things, of course, they could go in for a war. So this movement also led to intertribal wars, and then the West Africa became depopulated. When we talk of depopulation, that is now negative. Depopulation in West Africa. Depopulation means the number going down. The number of people in that area or in that country goes down. And why? What happened? What brought this is when we talk of slave trade. As the slaves were taken out of that place, of course, the ones who remained were now few. So that is why we are saying it caused depopulation. And then also, we have the African minerals getting exhausted. We have talked about, getting exploited. We have talked about gold being wanted from West Africa. So you will find that such minerals were exploited. They were taken all, and you will find that those countries remained without any important minerals again. And then it also affected wildlife. It led to depopulation of the elephants. Or we can simply say it reduced on the number of elephants in West Africa. How? We talked of the products or the goods that were wanted from West Africa, and among them we mentioned ivory. And where is ivory got? Ivory is got from the elephants, meaning that because of the need for this ivory, the people could now go and hunt the elephants. They could kill them so that they get the ivory to go and exchange with the Arabs, to go and exchange with the Jews and any other foreign group that was in North Africa. So as a result, the number of elephants reduced in West Africa. Today we are looking at West Africa. Tomorrow maybe we shall be having a question asking us for East Africa. That one will be simpler because we also talked about the Arabs at the East African coast, also resulting into the reduction of elephants in wildlife, in game parks in East Africa. Why? Because still they needed the ivory, which people were now to kill the elephants in order to get. And then we have the other last one, which says that the trade routes exposed Africa to the colonialists, meaning these trade routes that they started following, became now some roads, genuine roads, where now people could pass. And we now have the colonialists coming in, passing through those roads. And that is what we are saying. The trade routes exposed Africa to the colonialists who now came to rule Africa. Very soon we shall be looking at the colonialists in Africa. Now, we are going to look at another subheading, and that is after understanding this, and I believe you have understood this. We are now going to look at the decline. The decline of the trans-Saharan trade. Now, decline, we are looking at something going down in that it's now ending. Remember when we were looking at the East African community, the first one, whereby we say the East African community, the first East African community declined and it collapsed. That is now what happens. Something begins to decline and it finally collapses. So also here, we are going to look at the trans-Saharan trade declining, and finally it stopped being in operation. So we are going to look at reasons for its decline. Reasons for the decline of the trans-Saharan trade. The first reason says that there was shortage of commodities of trade. Commodities, those are the items of trade. Shortage of commodities. Shortage of commodities. So when we look at commodities, we look at commodities like ivory. So we shall find that such commodities and gold, such commodities were no longer present, they were no longer readily available in West Africa. So as a result, there was a decline. They started giving up. Then if we go there, we shall not get what we want, like that. And as a result, the trade started declining. And then secondly, we have the European colonialists of West Africa, that is, who came and colonized West Africa, who stopped that slave trade now, who are against the slave trade, and of which you will find that this made these people not again to be able to get the slaves from this way. And then we have the last point, which says that the rising of, or you say the starting of another type of trade that we call the transatlantic trade, that we shall be having as TAT. So we need now to pay attention to that, and we understand that when this trans-Saharan trade was declining, it meant that there was another type of trade which was beginning, which was called the transatlantic trade. And when we look at the transatlantic trade, we look at the map like we have it here, and remember, this is the Atlantic Ocean, which means there was another type of trade which was existing, or which was starting between the people of West Africa still, and this one now was done by the people of West Africa and those in America, as we shall be having that in our next discussion. So join me as we go to the transatlantic trade. That is another type of trade which was beginning, and it is the one now that replaced the trans-Saharan trade, making the trans-Saharan trade to collapse. We have this on our, so we go to page 37 so that we discuss that transatlantic trade. So we are going to look at the transatlantic trade. In this one, we are going to be having still Africa. We shall be having Africa. And then remember, this we were showing the Atlantic Ocean. We said Africa is a continent, and we said a continent is that large water body. Is that large mass of land surrounded by water. So on the side of Africa, to the west, we have what we call the Atlantic Ocean. This is the water body we call Atlantic Ocean. I want us to get this very well, such that tomorrow, if questions come asking us to give this, we should be able to tell transatlantic trade, trans-Saharan trade. The transatlantic trade came after the collapse of the trans-Saharan trade, and we say the starting or the beginning of this trade made the other one now to collapse, which means we are having America this way, we have North America, and then we have South America, and then we have also North America here. North America, and then we have South America. So we have America in general, and then remember we said in the north of Africa is a continent that we call Europe. Now, what was the transatlantic trade? Remember we say trans means across. Atlantic, it is that water body that we call Atlantic Ocean, which simply means this was the trade which was conducted by the people of West Africa. The other ones who were exchanging with the northerners now changed to exchange their goods with those in America. And then also we have some goods which were going from America to Europe, and then some goods coming from Europe back to where? Africa. So that is what we call transatlantic. I believe you are getting this lesson very well. So by definition, we shall simply say that transatlantic trade was the trade which was conducted by the people of West Africa, America, and Europe across the Atlantic Ocean. That is now what makes us to understand called transatlantic, across the Atlantic Ocean. I believe you are really understanding that. So we are having our Atlantic Ocean here, which was helpful to this type of trade. The trade carried out by the people of West Africa, America, and Europe across the Atlantic Ocean. Therefore, we are going to be looking at the goods which were exchanged during the transatlantic trade. When we go to page 38, it gives us the goods that were exchanged, that were wanted from Africa. Of course, that is West Africa. We have the goods that were in America, which were to be taken to Europe, and we had the goods which were leaving Europe coming back to Africa. And also we had some goods going back from Europe to America. But there is something that we need to understand before we talk about these goods. When we look at these trade routes, we call these trade routes. Trade routes. Meaning the routes that were used by the traders. You could find we have this that is from West Africa to America. And these trade routes, if we were to number them, we shall have this is trade route A. We have trade route B from America to Europe. Then we shall be having trade route C from Europe back to Africa. We can call this C. And then we shall also be having another trade route from West Africa direct to, let's just have it somewhere here. From West Africa direct to Europe. We can call that trade route D. So I hope we are able to see this very well. We have the trade routes. We have from West Africa to America, trade route A. We have it here. From America to Europe, trade route B. We have from Europe back to Africa. We have named it trade route C. And then finally we have from Africa direct to Europe, trade route D. Now, we are going to be looking at these routes, and we shall be able to say that these routes form something like a triangle. If we look at them well, you will see some triangular shape. For that reason, this type of trade can also be called triangular trade. Triangular trade. So the question is going to ask you tomorrow, why was the transatlantic trade also known as the triangular trade? Simply say, it was also called the triangular trade because the trade routes formed a triangle. Simple as that, and you get your wonderful tick. Now let's go and look at these trade items. I said on page 38, we are having items that were represented by A. from West Africa to America. Which items are those? Items we have from Africa to America, we have mainly slaves. We have mainly slaves exported from West Africa to America. And we shall be able to note why were slaves needed in America. We shall be able to tell that in America were farms, there were like gardens or large acre or large farms where these slaves were to be taken to provide what we call cheap labor. That is where we have the other song that you used to sing, saying, "We slaves in America, planting day and night, planting sugar and tea. When I was in America." I hope you ever heard about that song. So you will find that those slaves were taken to work in those plantation farms in America. And then also there were these copper mines where these minerals were like extracted. So they were to go there and provide cheap labor. And then we are having B, which shows the goods which were leaving America going to Europe. So we are having it also on that very page. Here we are going to be looking at what we call raw materials. We shall put these goods as raw materials. Raw materials, we understand these are goods which are used to make other goods. These are products used to make other goods. For example, we have talked of sugarcane, tea, cotton, tobacco. All those are raw materials which were used to make other products. So this one is showing us raw materials. Like the sugarcane, we have tobacco, tea, and cotton. And then now we are having from Europe to Africa. That is what we represent by letter C. From Europe to Africa, we are going to be having goods like timber coming from, timber is where we have, timber is for D, that's where we have the timber. But from Europe to Africa, we now have goods which have been processed. Like we are saying, these are raw materials. Now when these raw materials were taken to Europe, they had the factories that could transform them into finished products that were now brought and sold in Africa. Including, we are now on C, those are the goods like the cigarettes, the guns, sugar, clothes, and many others. So those are the ones that are representing with letter C. They are the ones which were now brought from Europe to Africa. That is after they have been processed. Then we have those which were taken from Africa to Europe. This one we have said they could take things like timber, and then also we have salt, the rhinoceros horns, and then we have the beeswax, among others. Those are the ones which were taken direct from West Africa to Europe. And at the end of it all, we are having triangular movements, triangular roots forming that triangular shape. And we have said that's what makes us to call it also the triangular trade, from the word triangle. We look at the effects of this triangular trade, or effects of the transatlantic trade. The first effect tells us that it led to the growth of states. Countries grew up, states grew up. And two, we have new crops were introduced, like we have crops like cocoa. Then also we are saying that some new goods were brought into Africa. For example, we have looked at goods like the guns, the sugar cane, sugar, clothes, all those were now new goods which were introduced or brought into Africa due to that kind of movement of goods. And then, of course, this opened also Africa. It made Africa known to the rest of the world, just like the other one of the trans-Saharan trade. And when we come to the negative effects, of course, the other ones have been the good ones. Coming to the negative effects, we are saying that slave trade was again here. Remember, we have said slaves were needed in America to work in the plantation farms. So slave trade was on the rise, which led to the suffering of people, the death of people, depopulation, as well as separation of families. And then we have still the Africa's resources being exploited, just like for the case of the trans-Saharan trade. And then we have on page 39 gives us the factors that promoted the transatlantic trade, meaning what made it to take place. We are saying there was increased European participation. The Europeans participated in it. Remember, we are having them also here. So they participated, and then the presence of the winds that helped in sailing the boats. Remember, we said this trade was carried out across the Sahara, the Atlantic Ocean. So that is another one. And then we have what we call Industrial Revolution. Industrial Revolution, we are meaning a time in Europe where they stopped using the local tools for doing work, and they now invented or started using modern machines for doing work. So the discovery of, due to this trade, they were now able to come up with that, with those ideas of inventing new machinery, which were now used in doing work instead of using the local tools. And also we have the abolition of the transatlantic trade, and we have the reasons whereby we are saying there was constant anti-slavery riots. People started rioting so much, showing that they were tired of being used as slaves, they were tired of being made to do harsh work under harsh conditions with less payments given to them. And then also, of course, slave trade got exposed to the outside world, which made very many people to condemn it, and it had to be abolished. And then we have the rise of the humanitarian groups that were against it. And finally, we have the attacks from the religious groups, religious organizations that were preaching against slave trade. So such things made it also to be ended or to be stopped. And that is what we call the transatlantic trade. So I'm happy in this lesson we have understood two important types of all trade activities or trade chances which were taking place in Africa. We looked at the first one, which was between the people of West Africa and those in North Africa. We called it trans-Saharan. This is the Sahara Desert. We say this one was done across the Sahara Desert. When you are asked to define this, make sure you mention the groups of people who participated. That's why we say the trans-Saharan trade was the trade carried out between the people of West Africa and those in North Africa across the Sahara Desert. Now we are saying it was replaced by the transatlantic trade, which was the trade carried out by the people of West Africa, America, and Europe across the Atlantic Ocean. You have to bring that across the Atlantic Ocean, because in the heading we are talking of transatlantic. Trans, which means we say, which we say it means across. So, dear candidate, that marks the end of our very nice and interesting lesson, and I believe you have watched it and you have benefited a lot from it. May God continue blessing you and guiding you as you strive through the term, as you prepare yourself for the final examination in your primary level. That is what we call primary living examination. May God continue to bless you.